Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. You're listening to GrokTalk.
GrokTalk.
Welcome back to GrokTalk. I'd like to thank our previous guest, Darren McKinney, from the, I gotta lean over and look,
American Tort Reform
Association, and then of course Ed Nail, the chairman of the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. Check it out, cnht.org, and see where he will be speaking next about vote fraud. It's a pretty popular topic around here because we got a lot of it. But we're going to change directions a little bit. We haven't had an author on in a little while, so it's kind of nice to take a break and talk to somebody who's out there writing. Warren Ray, who lives out in Illinois but is originally from New Hampshire, has written a book that you can get online for the stellar price of 99 cents. You can download it to your Kindle or your Nook. It's called Shadow Patriots. It basically is a post-economic apocalypse novel. And Warren, would like to welcome you to the program. How you doing?
I'm very well. How about yourself, Steve?
Doing great, thanks. How's the weather out there in Illinois?
It's livable. Trudging through the winter, as I'm sure you guys are as well.
Oh yeah, well we're having a break right now. It's going to be in the 40s and 50s for the next day or two, but then it's going to get cold again, and we'll go back to some more snow. So that's kind of how it is.
Pretty much what we get, you get. Steve,
yeah,
right?
well, yeah, you get that cold air from Canada though, because it just settles right down in there, and ooh, and you get the lake there and everything. And I mean, I know it's, if you're in central Illinois, it's far enough away, but it still has an effect. I grew up outside of Rochester, New York, and we used to have lake effect snow. We would get bands of squalls, and you would have like 4 feet of snow and then no snow, and then 4 feet of snow and then no snow, and you could come away from the coast and you would get these squall bands that would just form and dump snow and then stop and then dump snow, and you could live 20 miles away from the lake, and somebody 10 miles closer than you got nothing, and you got snowed in big time. It's awesome what lakes can do to your weather. So, you wrote this last year, Shadow Patriots. Why don't you give us tell us a little bit about your book?
Well, basically, it's about the downfall of America. It's what could happen in this country if things don't turn around. And the background of the book is, our economy has completely collapsed, and China takes advantage of our situation and attacks us on the West Coast in California. And it's a war that we're losing, and we're losing men and women big time. And they're desperate for volunteers to come in and help fight the war, and they're even letting people who are middle-aged in their 50s even join. And so the story follows my main character, Cole Winters. He's 52 years old, and he volunteers to help fight in the war. And he goes to this recruiting station, and he stumbles upon this plot that's killing the volunteers before they even get out into the war. And so it follows him along this journey, and he's just trying to, evade capture and survive and find out who's doing this and stop it from happening anymore. So he relies on other recruits to help him in this endeavor.
Wow, this is Skip Murphy, and I want to say thanks for coming on the show. This sounds like a combination of The Postman meets Red Dawn meets National Geographic's Doomsday Preppers.
Well, in a way, it can. I don't know. Some people have described it as a post-apocalyptic, whatever you want to call it, story. But I mean, it's kind of at the very beginning. I mean, bad things have happened in the country, but it's kind of pre that, and it could definitely lead to that if things don't, turn around. So it's definitely a cautionary tale as to what could happen.
Well, it certainly sounds like you've hit a sweet spot because, we are political and cultural bloggers, more on the political than the cultural side. And I will tell you that I have seen a shift on the last couple of years where people, and I remember when I first started to see it about a year and a half ago, where people who I would never expected to hear this kind of talk saying, I think I need to buy a generator. Maybe I need to buy a little bit of extra food that I can put away. And I need to be able to defend myself. Now, here in New Hampshire, you do have to be ready. We can have these ice storms that can take out the power system for a couple of weeks, and that has all kinds of ramifications. So most of us tend to prepare, or prep is the current word, for that, but a lot of other people are prepping for other types of things, including the economic collapse. But I have noticed a lot of people, especially on the writers, are looking at this with more than just, okay, this is no longer tinfoil hat territory. And
exactly.
In doing some of your research for this, did you get a chance to talk to some folks like this?
I didn't, and I got to be honest with you. I had no idea. I knew that prepping was a trend, but those thoughts really never entered my mind because I started this 3 years ago, and those thoughts really never entered my mind. And it wasn't until after I wrote the book that I was doing some marketing, and that's when I found out that the prepper it's a big trend. I mean, there's hundreds of websites out there on prepping. And so I find it fairly interesting that more people are prepping, and it is a good thing to prep because you never know what could happen. You're right. If something happens, food's gone, and you need a generator for heat and whatnot. And some people take it to an extreme, which is probably a good thing. We should always be prepared. And but I don't know if it will come to that. I'm more of an optimist than a pessimist, and I think things can turn around. You see. The Tea Party movement, rising up more and more now. And, we got great senators out there are fighting the cause. And so I do believe that things can turn around and that we don't need to go down this road that we're going down.
It's always a choice. And we make our choices as a society through the ballot box. But I'm watching the last couple of weeks with the news coming out of Venezuela, and especially what we've seen. And I'll be honest with you, a couple nights ago, ABC News, or was it last night, showed the street violence, the almost military-style street violence coming out of the Ukraine. And for the first time in my life that I can remember, ABC, a national network, is actually showing the results of sniper fire on human beings being killed on national TV in prime time, the 6 o'clock news hour or 6:30 hour. And I'm going, these people made choices as well, and look what's happening there. And I'll go a little bit into the tinfoil hat area here. There's a lot of conspiracy going on. And unfortunately, among the right, the far right, or maybe the prepper community, we've seen so much being done by this administration that we've never seen done by other administrations of, ruling by executive fiat. We see the FCC trying to move into areas that it's not supposed to be, where the latest news was they were going to send observers into the newsrooms of TV, radio, and newspapers. We see, other agencies trying to, basically kill off the coal industry. Is that a function of our Democrat limited government history? And it's to the point where more than a few bloggers are saying, I never used to believe in conspiracy theories, but almost every single one of the older ones is starting to come true with overreach by government. With the NSA spying, the DEA, the FBI. It's like, what the heck? So now that you've done the book, and now you're doing sort of some of the research, are you hearing that from other people? And how would that tie back into your book?
Well, it's interesting because, you're right. This thing in Ukraine is in a way, it's kind of fascinating to see. And also down in Venezuela, that people are rising up. You don't hear much about the Venezuela story as much as you do with the Ukraine thing. And it is interesting to see that, people everybody wants to be free. And, we should have known that this was going to happen because, Obama was, when, a few years ago when Iran started protesting and he did nothing about it, and he got a chance to really help out the people of Iran, and he did nothing. And so we should have known then that this was the way he was going to act with all these types of things. And here we go with the Ukraine and Venezuela, and people are rising up. And the president, he just sits there silently. It makes you wonder what side of the aisle he would be on if he was would he be a protester or would he be for the government?
Well, in Ukraine, as an example, I just read a very fabulous post that I think I put up. I don't remember if I did. If I didn't, I will put a link up to it. A gentleman who gave an excellent analysis of the situation in the Ukraine. And the problem there was that the president, who is believed to be a puppet of Putin, was beginning to create a culture of very much like Obama's, where he was passing these very dictatorial executive order type laws and being very restrictive. And the students came out and said, you've been beating on us for a while, excuse me, but we'd really like to consider something different. We're protesting against this overreach. We didn't give you this power. You're taking it. You're not entitled to it.
Right.
And then of course the military came out, the police came out, and they started causing some serious harm. So former Afghanistan vets, Russian, Ukrainian guys who served in Afghanistan, war with Russia, and they came out to protect the kids, not just because they were their kids or not, but because they were the next generation. And then that led to this other thing. And then you literally had millions of people coming out and saying, we didn't give you this authority. And this guy kind of backed off, then he moved forward and backed off and moved forward. And the problem is that they want the Ukraine to be a socialist, Russia-like country, and these people have stepped up and said, no, we're against that. We're against your corruption. And you bring up government corruption in your book. It's a major driver in the story early on about how this all comes apart.
Well, and it's interesting because what's happening there is in Ukraine and Venezuela is that there was a tipping point. And at some point in this country, there will be a tipping point where we're going to just say absolutely not. And you could almost say the Tea Party movement is kind of like that, because we're getting tired of the things that are going on. And so, the more Obama does these things, the more there'll be a boiling point. And when that happens, then we will rise up. But I don't necessarily think that we'll rise up protesting like what's happening in Ukraine and Venezuela, because we do have freedom of speech and we do have opportunity to protest and have our voices heard, whereas in other countries they don't necessarily have that. And so it does allow us to vent our anger and our frustration in different ways. And that's why I think that I don't necessarily think that we would ever come to that point, because we rise up in different ways. And that's why I remain to be an optimist, because I think that I just think that.
Well, I agree with you, because if you look at like the Wilson administration, or if you look at what went on under Roosevelt, there were gangs roaming the streets, representing the interests of the government, suppressing opposition, physically, verbally. They were out and doing basically fascist things, and we recovered from that, pretty much, more or less, in one form or another. So there is always hope. I always think about that. I think about, the organizations that Roosevelt created whose sole purpose was to oppress businesses who might disagree with his policies. They created a massive government bureaucracy whose whole function was to make sure that everybody agreed with whatever Roosevelt was doing, essentially. He was willing to pack the court. He was, and if you go back to Wilson, it was a war economy. It was your standard nationalist, fascist war economy. It was driven by a very structured, militarized social order that was defended and protected by people who were supporting the government. And we aren't there yet. I think the Tea Party does continue to apply pressure to the Republican Party. I think part of the tipping point that we're talking about has a lot to do with how Republicans respond. And right now they haven't been responding very well. You mentioned a couple who stand out. And as long as we continue to have some voice somewhere, even at the state level or the federal level, I think people will keep their powder dry. But if you get to a point where you can't find anybody, like in your story, you're looking for somebody to be president, and you get all the way down to like the Secretary of Labor or something, and it turns out he's corrupt too, or whoever he is. So now at that point, you're
Speaker of the House. Yeah.
Speaker of the House. You're like, now there's nobody. Where do we go from here?
Right. And in my book, there are certain conspiracies that made this happen. I don't delve into a lot of the conspiracies, but in the end of the book, there is a conspiracy that is exposed as to how the government is, behind this. And I do have a part 2 of the book, and that will expose an even bigger conspiracy as to how this all happened. And so there are definitely conspiracies in there, and And you're right. There are people in the government who work behind the scenes to make people do different things and pit one against the other. And so, yeah, that's it's definitely a way for I'm not quite sure how to explain it. It's definitely people out there who are conspiring against America. Let's put it that way.
Okay, Ray, we're going to take a 60-second break. Warren, sorry,
Sure.
we're going to take a 60-second break. We're right. Stay on the phone. We'll be back in just a minute.
Betcha.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
GrokTalk.
Okay, we are back with Warren Ray, author of Shadow Patriots. And Skip, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned at the end of the book, and I have to admit I have not yet read it. Steve was telling me about it during one of our previous breaks, so I'm probably going to go out and purchase it and pull it down on my wife's iPad and take a look at it.
Oh, by the way, I went and looked, and because Amazon has the bestseller link list,
Yes.
And Warren's book is kicking the ass of Nancy Pelosi and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So there you go.
Oh, that's cool.
That's kind of a low bar, Steve.
It is a low bar, I know, I'm sorry, but it was funny. I didn't have time to go look at other books that were like yours. But I just found it very amusing that, Pelosi's book, for example, has been out since 2008, and her ranking is like 436,000, and yours is like 50,000 or 40,000 or something like that. So anyway, I'm
the
sorry.
thing about that Amazon, that Amazon, it's a great thing for self-authors, self-published authors. And those rankings, they change daily. It's really quite an amazing thing. But yeah, it is kind of funny that her book, and what was that guy, that Obama's guy in Chicago, that professor who was the bomber there?
Yeah.
Bill Ayers.
Really? Yes. Well, I was listening to Rush a few weeks ago, and he was saying that his book only sold like 200 copies.
Wow.
And he had a major publisher. It was in the bookstores.
And and those were just insiders. Probably, maybe he bought them.
Or he bought them.
And he gave them away. This is my vanity book. Anyway, I'm sorry. So Skip, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to forget my previous question. I'm going to go to this because I think it's rather interesting to see the democratization of publishing because of electronic books, electronic publishing, the ability to, for basically a single author like yourself, to kind of go around the major publishing houses and to be able to do this all on your own.
Well, it's a wonderful thing. You've got, it's all changing. Everything's changing. You can. You can publish your own video and put it on YouTube. You can have your own podcast, have your own radio station. Everything is being is like that. And in the publishing world, yeah, you got people out there that are publishing their own books, and there's even major authors are now going around the big six publishing companies and publishing their own book. And they retain all the rights, and it's on the internet forever. As opposed to a bookstore, it's the average life of a book in a bookstore is 6 months. And it takes it can take a couple of years even to get published, and even then when you're a first-time author, they expect you to do all your own marketing and promotions anyways. The days of going on a book tour, those days are gone.
Do you have any?
It's a wonderful vehicle.
Do you have any advice for people who are considering this, seeing as you've gone through it?
Yeah, right. No, seriously. I mean, anybody can be a writer these days, and there's hundreds of thousands of self-published authors out there now, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and more and more people are going to Kindle writing. Having a Kindle, it's a great thing. You can download a book instantaneously and start reading it, and the books are reasonably priced. I mean, I've got mine on for 99 cents. It won't be 99 cents forever, but there's the average book sale, the average book costs about $4. And what a great thing that is. But yeah, self-published authors out there, if you want to write, absolutely write. And make sure you have a decent editor to find all your typos.
I could use one of those.
Yeah, well, I mean,
there's a lot of books out there that have a lot of typos, and because editors are expensive, and
oh yeah,
it's a process.
Yeah, well, being the leading conservative libertarian political blog site here in New Hampshire, we self-publish multiple times a day, depending on how the spirit moves and how fast the fingers can fly. So we understand that, except we just don't get paid for this stuff.
Right.
But my question is, have you been published by a publishing house before, so that you can contrast that process to what you've done self-publishing, and how do the economics work?
I have never been published before, and the economics. If you price your book at say $4, with Amazon they pay you 70%, which is you make like $3, and that's about what you would make with if you're a first-time author, or even some authors. That's pretty much what they get paid from the publishing companies, and and plus you get that money forever. Like I said, books are only out there for 6 months, so you don't have a whole lot of time to make that money. And so the economics does work out in the end. And if anybody wants a really good website to look at, there's a blog out there by Joe Conrath, the Newbie's Guide to Publishing, and he explains and he goes through everything, and he's a self-published author himself. And he's all for self-publishing. He thinks Barnes & Noble is going to go out of business within a year or two, which it probably will. The Borders went out of business. And so, eventually you're going to see the downfall of the big publishing houses. You'll still have some small publishing companies out there. It's kind of like newspapers. A lot of newspapers are going out of business or are really hurting right now. And it's definitely the wave of the future.
I lost my train of thought. Okay, anyway, so back to your book. Sorry. We're not out of time yet, but why don't
where to go with that?
Where to go get it? You talked about. I know it's available. You can download it for the Nook. You can download it for the Kindle. I know you have a website as well.
Well, I've got a Facebook page on my website. I've been kind of lazy about getting it up right now, but that is coming in the coming days. So
where can they find you? Are you under your name on Facebook?
You can. I got a Facebook page, the Shadow Patriots, a fan page on Facebook, and I'll go ahead and link this podcast to that.
Cool.
And absolutely, you can just get on Amazon and Google the Shadow Patriots. They'll pull it right up.
So, is there anything else you can tell us about your next book?
Oh yes, more people will die.
Oh, so it's like
optimistic.
It's like Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. There's I have a huge conspiracy that's going to come out in the second book, and it's going to surprise a lot of people, and it'll make people think that maybe so. Because I have there's things in the book that I came up with 3 years ago that have already happened in the first book. It's kind of scary. I'll be sitting there listening to Glenn Beck, and he'll talk about something, and I'll look at my daughter, and we look at it, and she's like, "That's in our book already."
It's kind of an eerie thing. And that goes back to what I said earlier. It's hard to not believe some of the things that come out because of what we've already seen in our recent history coming out of this administration. Stuff that you never think that would ever happen. You go, "Oh crap!"
Right. And I could not have written this book 10 years ago. Because it would have been unbelievable. No way. These things would never happen. But now people are waking up and thinking, these things can happen because look what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Well, the economic pressure alone, I mean, once people come to grasp with the notion of a $17 trillion and growing debt, and we were talking about Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire in a couple different segments earlier, and the Republicans are even on board to take $2.4 billion from where? Where the heck's the money coming from? It's coming from debt that we bought from China, which is part of your book, and it's like, and that money to pay for that debt, if we ever do pay for it, is going to come from us and our kids, so it's not free. We've been talking about these things and that kind of pressure. So as people come to grasp the notion that number is so large that maybe there is a problem and we won't be able to pay it back.
Well, and that's the premise. That's kind of the premise of China attacking America. Is we owe them bukus of dollars, and they want their money back, and they're going to come and get it if they have to.
I would give them California if they just asked.
Well, it's funny. I talked to some people about it, and they all say the same things. They can have it.
Yeah, I mean, California's got tons of debt. They can have it. They can have the oranges. They can have Hollywood. They can have the Valley. Take it.
Exactly.
All right, well, Warren, we're coming to the end of our segment. I want to thank you very much for coming on. We have each other's email. Let me know when your book's coming out, and we'll have you back on.
You betcha. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, thank you very much, sir. You have a great day.
All right, bye-bye now.
All right, that was Warren Ray, the author of Shadow Patriot. It's always great to have people on who are like pretty much the rest of us and just doing something a little different. You know, he's publishing, we're podcasting, and that's awesome.
Absolutely, and I was surprised with some of this podcast with him. It certainly is refreshing to hear from somebody outside of us that you're right. Thinks probably a lot of stuff that should never have happened has happened. And it's like, well, let's go a little bit further, a few steps out, and go, well, where can we go from here? What could the future history actually be? Which is really what that kind of genre is. You know, I used to be a big science fiction reader back in the day, and all it really was what's happening now, and how can I basically do like Star Trek, cowboys in space, and see what the different future lines could be.
I know people are like, how could you even think that way? But the real question is, how could you think that way? How could you get to a point in your culture, politically, socially, where you would look at something like this and go, yeah, that's actually feasible?
Well, you look at I brought Ukraine and Venezuela up for specific reasons. And oftentimes we hear, well, that could never happen here in America. Well, I'm not so sure that that's a true statement anymore.
Anybody who went through the 60s knows that's not true, because we had riots, it was
pretty bad, but it wasn't nationwide.
No, it wasn't nationwide, but I mean, still, that gives you an example of how it starts. I mean, in the Ukraine, it's mostly in Kiev, but that's because everybody went to Kiev.
Yes.
And it will spread. I mean, and that's kind of like the campus riots. You know, you always have things.
You look at Greece, and everything happened there as well. We are a larger country, but we think just because we are America and our history, it can't happen here. I got news for you. We got the same human nature as they do anywhere else. Under the right or wrong conditions, it could happen here.
Absolutely. And that's this week's program. We'd like to thank the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers and Ed Nail for allowing us to broadcast from his offices in Concord, New Hampshire. We'd also like to thank, I keep forgetting people's names, Darren McKinney for coming on the program earlier, and Ed, of course, for coming in and updating us on what was going on. Next week we'll have Karen Testerman back on the show and some other guests. And, of course, moving forward, we'll be here every week, hopefully, to give you 2 hours of news and information you could only get from GrokTalk.com.
Grok TV.